Hey, good morning everyone. It's Miss Packard, and today we're talking about data in the real world. It's really important that you watch yesterday's video first and complete that Google form first for me, please. So, what we're doing today, our objective is that students will be able to understand the importance of being a critical consumer of media. So, what I'm going to do first is define that. What is a critical consumer? Then we'll go over some examples of data in the real world. And then your classwork assignment for today will be in the form of a Google form again. So let's get started. First off, what is a critical consumer? So there's two parts of this definition. We've got a consumer, which is someone who purchases or uses something, right? So you are a consumer of food, you're a consumer of media. And if you need to, take a second to pause the video and write these definitions down. And the other part is critical. So critical is an adjective that means involving an analysis of merits and faults. So a critical consumer is analyzing before buying something. So if you did research on what kind of phone you want, then you were being a critical consumer. So you might have been like, oh, I want an iPhone because it has these features, or I want a Samsung because it has other features. So that's all part of being a critical consumer. But we're specifically going to be talking about a critical consumer of media. So what we're going to be talking about is information valid? So is information true and valid, or is it misleading? So is it causing you to believe something that's not really true? So that's what we're going to talk about today. My second part of this definition is, why is this important for you, right? So every day you're on social media and you're exposed to a lot of information, okay? So first, this is important because there's a lot of information on social media. Second, I'm going to give you some tips on being a critical consumer. So the first thing you want to do is say, okay, who is the source? And what do they want? So, for example, if you see ads on social media, so advertisements. Ads mean that a company wants you to buy their product, right? They're trying to make money. And that's going to be a common thing here. So people want to make money. So when you're looking at different things in the media, you're like, okay, who is posting this and what do they want? If it's an ad, you might think, okay, they could be maybe over-exaggerating, not quite lying, but pushing the truth to get me to want to buy their product. So that's one way that you can be a critical consumer, is by thinking about what do they want, and if you can see, oh, they want me to buy this, then you're being a critical consumer and you can adjust your actions accordingly. Another example might be politicians, right? Anyone running for office, they want your vote, right? They want you to like them. So they might say something that they know you want to hear. They could be targeting certain audiences. So there's a lot of sources, a lot of different kinds of sources that may be saying different things for different reasons. So you want to think about the reasons, okay? The second thing I want you to be doing when you read the media or see different things is checking the facts. we're all familiar with the term fake news. So what you want to do is, in order to determine something's reliable, determine reliability. If you see and compare with other sources, so you can compare information with other sources and know the source, like we said in part 1. So some sources are different than others, right? You get articles like the Daily Mail or something like that that's purely for entertainment, right? Or then you have sources like NPR, the National Public Radio, or BBC, and those sources tend to be a lot more reliable because they are national and international publications, right? The third thing I want you to do, which kind of combines with 1 and 2, is to be checking your own motives. So, are you interested in entertainment? Then, sure. Entertainment. Then sure, you can be on Twitter for information, or Instagram, or like I said, the Daily Mail, Snapchat. But if you want information or facts, if that's your motive, if your motive is to get information and facts, then you don't want to be using Twitter, Instagram, or the Daily Mail, right? Like I said, there's like NPR, BBC, or like journal articles. And you can determine the reliability of something. So you're comparing with other sources, you're checking the facts to see what's true and what's not. Okay? So now, how does this all relate to logarithms and exponents, right? Because we're in this unit where we are looking at data. Like yesterday, we looked at logarithm and exponential graphs. So I want to give you a couple examples real quick of misleading graphs, and then we'll talk about the graphs from yesterday. So first, percent of people who agreed with court. Okay, this is misleading. Take a second, see if you can figure out why. My first issue with this is that our scale here starts at 50. So already we know that this line is 50 people instead of 0, right? Usually you want to have a graph that's 0 here and then would go up to 50 somehow, right? But here we're starting at 50, so this graph makes it seem like twice as many Democrats voted or agreed with the court than Republicans. But that's not really true, because this number is 62%, and this number is 54%. Right? And same with independents, 54% of independents agreed with the court. So really, 62% and 54%, that's pretty close. That is not double like this graph kind of makes it look. So this is misleading, and this is because of the scale, right? And the y values, or the vertical axis. So this would be a graph that you want to look at really closely and look at that. Look at that vertical axis and see what are those numbers and what do they mean. Okay, second example. Over 100 million now receiving federal welfare. Okay, this is an article from 2012, and I know these numbers are a little hard to read for you, but this is 108 million, and this is 100 million. Okay, so you've got 100 million here. And then let's look down at the very bottom. Oh, wait, this is 94 million. Okay, so in 2009, we were at something like 97 million. 97 million receiving federal welfare. And then in 2011, we are at, okay, maybe 107 million. Again, this graph makes it seem like the number of people on federal welfare has tripled. But in reality, that's not the case. It's only gone up 10 million, which is not that much. So this graph is misleading for the same reasons, right? So the point is, look closely at axis labels, right? This is my vertical axis. Starts at 97 million. Or 94 million, my bad. Alright, take a second to get those notes if you need to, and I will post this document so that you can print it out yourself if you want. Alright, so I do want to show you the correct graph for over 100 million now receiving federal welfare. So this is the original, misleading. This graph is correct, or not as misleading, right? So what this shows is my vertical axis is starting at 0. Ooh, that's nice. And we are increasing linearly. We have a linear scale here. We're going up 20 million each time. Okay? So here's that 97 that we had before, 97 million, and then here's our 107 million. And in this graph, those values look pretty close, right? So you want to actually look at both, because, I mean, you really could be misled by this one too. So you want to compare, like I said, compare different sources, because these graphs are showing the same exact data, but they look totally different, right? Okay, so I would say not misleading, but still could be. So you always want to compare sources. All right, one last example before we get to the stuff we did yesterday. Common injuries children suffer. If you just look at the title and you see a spinal injury is 5.2%, do you think 5.2% of children suffer spinal injuries? That is a high number. That means if 21% of children suffered a thigh bone injury, that would mean that 20 of you, so I have about 100 kids, right? I have about 100 students. That would mean that 21 of you would have suffered a thigh bone injury, if that's what we're talking about. So you got to be really careful reading the subtitle, right? So this is top traumatic orthopedic injuries for children who are hospitalized. So you don't want to just look at the title. You want to see what information is being displayed. So this is really 21% of hospitalized children for an orthopedic injury. Or thigh bone. And orthopedic means having to do with bones. Okay, so that means that if a kid comes in with a broken bone, 21% of kids that come in with broken bones have a thigh bone injury. And 5% of kids who are already in the hospital or who are coming to the hospital have a spinal injury, if it's in the category of bone injury. So it's another misleading because of the title. All right, now let's talk about the data from yesterday and talk about how this could be misleading to people. Okay, so this graph shows the total cases in the U.S. from March 1st to April 9th. And we start here at a little bit under 100. And then it kind of seems like this like linear increase. At initial first glance, someone might think that this is not increasing that much. But you all are very smart, and you're going to be looking at that y-axis and say, wait a minute, what's going on here? We've got 100, then 1,000, then 10,000, then 100,000, and then this is a million, right? No, sorry. 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Oh, no, that is a million. So that's another way you could be misled by this graph. You could think we already have a million cases, but that's not true, right? We know that this value is about 300,000. But this, like I said, if you're reading a graph, I just got misled by this graph. I was like, a million? That doesn't seem right. Like, we're not at a million. But it's because we have this logarithm scale, right? So here, this is a logarithmic scale. And every time we increase like 1 bar on this graph, we're multiplying that value by 10 each time, right? So this is like times 10 every time we go up. That is a times sign. And times 10 every time we go up. So yeah, the top of this graph is a million. It could be misleading in multiple ways. You might think it's not increasing that much, or you might think, oh my God, we're already at a million cases. So this is one way you have to be really careful when looking at graphs. You want to look at the vertical axis. You want to look at the horizontal axis. Look at those labels. See what they're trying to tell you, okay? Sometimes you have number of cases in thousands, where you might just, it might seem like, oh, like 1, 2, 3, 4, but they're in thousands in parentheses. All right. Last example is our exponential graph, right? So this shows the number of cases here, and it's 5,000. No, this is 50,000. I should put commas in here. 10,000, 100,000, 150,000, 200,000, 250,000, and 300,000, right? So the maximum here is 300,000, whereas if I compare here, the maximum was 1 million. So, like I said, this could be very misleading data. And then you look at the curve, and it looks like, oh, we're like at 0 for a while. But we know because this is 0 to 50,000 that this number was actually about 100 from our other graph. So the importance here is you want to compare sources. There's a lot of misleading information in the media. Even these graphs that I've made are misleading. So you want to compare, and you want to look at both, because we know this is exponential growth with how many people are being affected. But if you look at a graph like this, it looks like it's linear. It looks like a line because of that logarithmic scale on the vertical axis. So I'm going to make sure we label this linear scale. And then we have our exponential growth. Exponential growth. Okay? And this is only data to April 9th. This has kept going. So I want to say one last thing at the end. Please, please, please stay inside. Wash your hands. And stay safe, okay? We all miss you so, so much, and we want you to stay inside, wash your hands, stay safe, so we can all get back to school soon, okay? All right, I will talk to you all later. Bye.